shows, podcasts coming out of this, that and the other, including the deeply unsuccessful and massively unpopular The Session podcast. Download it for free from the App Store or globalplayer.com. At 1, Sheila Fogarty. Next, James O'Brien.
Thank you, Tom. The time is approaching 10 o'clock and, as Tom just alluded to, the Mayor of London is about to assume the position and start taking your calls. I suspect that ULEZ will appear. It would, if you've been just for me, though, can we maybe get some questions about something else on the board as well? Or how dare I? I will, as ever, I will be guided entirely by you, your whims and proclivities, but it is now imminent, and as the debate surrounding it gets particularly uglier than I can remember any similar scheme becoming, I do wonder whether there's a bigger story behind why it's drawing so much fire when other cities have just cracked on happily.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 10 o'clock, marks for GCSE exams have fallen for a second year running as grading returns to pre-pandemic levels. Figures show 68.2% of entries in England, Wales and Northern Ireland reached the threshold of 4, equivalent to a C. That's just above pre-pandemic levels, but well below a peak of 77.1% in 2021. The Schools Minister, Nick Gibb, has told LBC it is the right time to adjust the system.
It is important that we get back to normal now with the gradings, same level of gradings we had in 2019 and the years before, and the same level of gradings that we will have going forward. We did actually help students this year with equations and formula sheets, so they had less to memorise. We spaced the exams so they had more time to revise.
Security experts say a plane crash in which Evgeny Prigozhin may have died is probably the work of Vladimir Putin. The head of the mercenary group Wagner was among 10 people travelling on a private jet that came down yesterday afternoon. He led a short-lived uprising on Moscow 2 months ago. Figures show the backlog of asylum claims in the UK has hit another record high. More than 175,000 people were waiting for an initial decision on an asylum application at the end of June. That is up by 44% on the same point in 2021. Labour's Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock says the delays are acting as a magnet.
That is drawing more and more people across the channel. They've wasted time on this unworkable, unethical and unaffordable Rwanda plan rather than investing in our National Crime Agency to crack down on the people smugglers. And they're totally failing to get a returns deal with the European Union.
The government says it's introduced a number of measures to help clear the backlog. Japan has started releasing radioactive water from the Fukushima power plant into the Pacific Ocean. It's been collecting the water since March 2011, when a huge earthquake caused a nuclear disaster. Regulators insist the release is safe, but it's prompted China to ban seafood from Japan. The candidates for the Republican presidential nomination have taken part in their first TV debate. The contest was dominated by entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, who has never previously run for public office. Donald Trump, who is due to be arrested later over election meddling allegations in Georgia, refused to take part. In the city, the FTSE 100 a short time ago was up 33 at 73.54. The pound buys €1.16 and $1.27. LBC weather, sunshine and showers for many areas. The rain heavy and thundery across parts of southern England. A high of 25 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watt.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Speak to Sadiq. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, takes your calls.
And good morning. It is 4 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the Mayor of London is limbering up in preparation of taking your calls. If you're tuning into this feature for the first time, then the conversation is driven almost entirely by calls. But I I reserve the right to intervene or insist on sort of further detail or further answering. The number you need, as ever, is 0345 60 60973. You can, of course, text and tweet to your heart's content as well, and I will do my level best to include as many of your contributions as possible. But I think we should probably crack straight on. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good to speak to you, James. As ever, looking forward to speaking to not just Londoners, but those from across the country, which is where we go for the first caller, actually. It's from Abbots Langley, and it's Lance, I think. Lance, good morning.
Good morning, Sadiq. How are you?
I'm all right, you know. Well, but I'll review that answer after your question.
Yeah, right, Sadiq, my question is, I'm a window cleaner. I carry a lot of water in the back of my van. I'm based in Abbots Langley, so I can't get the scrappage thing. I do blocks of flats. So yesterday I drove into the ultra low emission zone, 50 metres, stopped my van all day long, cleaned the block of flats, finished the job, drive 50 metres out of the low emission zone. So basically, I've done 100 metres that day in the low emission zone. It's going to cost me £12.50. Is there any way around that? I mean, do you think that's fair? I mean, the mileage that I've done is 100 metres. I've got several jobs like that. So I don't know,
Lance,
if...
So Lance, firstly, thanks for your question. Look, there are many window cleaners in London as well who simply can't use the tube, bus or public transport and need a vehicle to get around, which is why I expanded the support we give to vans, minibuses and cars. Unfortunately, I can't use London taxpayers' money to support people outside of our great city, including you. But what I've been doing is lobbying the government, saying, look, the government rightly is giving financial support to those in Bristol, Birmingham, Portsmouth, elsewhere. But they're refusing to give any financial support to either Londoners or those in the home counties like you who are doing a hard day's work and can't yet pivot towards a van that's newer than 7 years or a car that's newer than 17 a year. So, Lance, I'm going to not give up in relation to lobbying the government for more support. The Surreys, the Hertfordshires, the Kents and others have also been making the same points you're making in relation to support for the home counties. But I hope you'll appreciate why I've got to focus the limited resources I have, and that's City Hall resources, not government resources, to Londoners. And I have recently announced for a small business, everyone who employs up to 50 people can receive support, 3 vans of support and, £7,000, including support to retrofit their van. What I can't do, Lance, is use, London taxpayers' money for non-Londoners. But I tell you who can, that's the government.
Do you think they would be doing this? Can we just run through, with your help, who started what? Because there was an ultra-low emission zone in place before you became mayor, or is that right?
So this government passed what's called an air quality directive, which required cities to clean up their air because most of the air pollution, and by the way, the air pollution is not inevitable, it's preventable, happens in cities. So the government says, listen, there's this directive now, you've got to clean up your air. The best way to clean up air is by clean air zones, and the government required cities to have clean air zones. We call them ultra-low emission zones. And they gave money towards cities like Bristol, Birmingham, Portsmouth, and other cities towards the clean air zone. The Tories lost the election in 2016 and I won the election. But before he stopped being the mayor, Boris Johnson announced he was going to bring in ultra-low emission zone and already brought in what's called a low emission zone. And so the point is, this was the direction of travel, but for reasons that probably only Rishi Sunak and the government can answer, they're refusing to give any support to London, even though they're requiring us, rightly by the way, to clean up our air, because the government commissioned a report and the government's own report said across the country up to 36,000 premature deaths a year. In London, it's around 4,000 premature deaths a year, but also at least a whole host of other health issues from children having stunted lungs, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease. So I support the government in their objectives. I'm asking them and imploring them to support us and people like Lance to make that transition.
So to be clear, if Lance lived on the outskirts of Bristol and was seeking to ply his window cleaning trade within the emission zone, even though he lived outside it, he would be in receipt of government help from central government.
Correct. The government help applies to other cities and regions around the country, excluding London and the southeast.
Okay, and it was in 2015 that Boris Johnson did a lap of honour after confirming the world's first ultra-low emission zone. What about
But also it's Boris Johnson who introduced the low emission zone, which applies to lorries for the entire Greater London. And so, clearly, at that time, Boris Johnson and the Conservative government agreed of the need to clean up air. In fact, they introduced an air quality directive requiring cities and regions to do so.
Lance, a few people are, and I hope you'll take this in the spirit that it's intended, a few people are suggesting either that you get a longer hose or that you park on the edge of the zone.
I'll tell you what, I actually did think about that. I could probably, there's one block of flats, I could probably get it with my hose.
This cometh the hour, cometh the man.
Lance, so listen, I appreciate James is just jesting and stuff, but listen, can I say I understand the challenge you're going through, and it's because of the concerns people like you raised in London that I, changed eligibility for the scrappage scheme. So what I've done is announced a scrappage scheme in January without government support, supporting micro businesses like yours in London, low-income families in London. In July, I expanded it to every single family in London who's got a child that receives child benefit. And after the court case, I expanded it further to give more support towards those who are retrofitting vehicles because it costs more than we originally thought, but also to give more support to those who need to buy a new van and scrap their old van, and expanded that support as well, because I do understand the concerns of people like you, Lance. I can help people like you in London. I just simply can't to those in Abbots Langley and outside London.
Have you been surprised by how ugly things have got, particularly in the last week? I don't know, I presume you saw the Evening Standard. It was almost like a wanted poster, wasn't it? Sadiq's suburban nightmare. Mayor's popularity in outer London at minus 24 with a week to go before ULEZ expansion. Front page of the Telegraph yesterday. I worry as a national radio station that we're sometimes a little bit too London-centric. The Daily Telegraph didn't have any such concerns yesterday. Daily Mail today, Khan said ULEZ wasn't best way to improve air, so is it all just a cash grab? I mean, have you been surprised by the tone of the coverage?
Yeah. Look, can I just? We've discussed this before, but can I just be clear to those who are listening to this exchange for the first time around ULEZ? The decision to expand the ULEZ so it covers all of London was a difficult decision for me to take. Arguably one of the most difficult decisions I've taken as mayor for the last 7 years, but it was a vital one for me to take because I see the consequences of air pollution in our great city. But also we know the ULEZ is effective. How do we know that? Because in central London, when we introduced the ULEZ, we saw a reduction of almost 50% of the toxicity in our air. You know what? There are a third fewer children being admitted to hospital with asthma-related illnesses caused by air pollution. We expanded it to in London and saw a further improvement of 20% in our air. But in outer London is where the worst air is. The 10 boroughs with the largest number of premature deaths are in outer London. If you saw the 30 GPs with the largest number of respiratory problems, 24 of those are in outer London. So look, it was a difficult decision for me to take, but I've been listening all the time, which is why without a penny of support from the government, I've been providing additional support to Londoners. And I'll continue to listen, but we can't afford to delay this, not because of pounds and pence, but because of the numbers of premature deaths and ill health caused by air pollution.
I mean, you're right. I have heard you say that before, but you didn't answer my question about the ugliness of the coverage and the tone.
No, I have been surprised. No, let me answer directly. Apologies for not answering your question directly. Yeah, listen, I didn't expect for there to be, people linking my policies to clean up the air with conspiracy theories. I did expect people to have genuine concerns, and I've been listening to those genuine concerns. I didn't expect, this to be weaponized by others who you and I have exchanged with, who didn't believe COVID was real, believed in conspiracy theories and so forth. So the challenge I have is to listen to, and I will always listen to Londoners. I will always try and address genuine concerns Londoners have, but I have been surprised how they've been latched onto by others.
Let's crack on. Thank you, Lance. Another call, please.
Thanks, Lance. The next caller is from South London, and it's Lorraine. Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning. I'd just like to ask why it is that all blue badges are not exempt from the ultra-low admission.
No, blue badges are exempt. What happened, Lorraine, was because each borough has a different criteria for issuing blue badges, we worked with the DWP on the criteria, the Department of Work and Pensions, on the criteria they have. But the good news is because of the further announcement I made on the 1st of August, every single Londoner, forget whether you've got a blue badge or not, every single Londoner is eligible for support. But if you are disabled, you're entitled to exemptions and grace periods. And so that means that the ULEZ doesn't apply if your vehicle is, adapted for those who are disabled. So the ULEZ doesn't apply for certain disabled people from next Tuesday. But there are exemptions period, there are grace periods, but also if you're somebody who uses the NHS regularly, there's also an NHS reimbursement scheme as well.
What's your precise situation, Lorraine?
Please, right, my situation is this, yeah. I have a disabled child. He has hidden disabilities. We have a blue badge for him because obviously he cannot use public transport and he cannot be too far from the car for safety reasons. Now, I've tried to get the exemption, but because my child doesn't get the high rate mobility side of DLA, we're not entitled to it. And then when I phoned TfL the other day, because I'm devastated, because it's like, what does this mean for my family? We're not going to be able to go nowhere. We're going to have no quality of life. I cannot afford to pay the ULEZ every day. Yeah? And I was told basically it's tough. My child ain't disabled enough. So I'm just curious because it's not easy to get a blue badge. They don't just award them to people. Because if it was that easy, everyone would have one. So I'm wondering why it is people that get disability allowance for their child but have the low rate mobility don't get exemption. That's discriminating. I find that you're picking on us. It's not fair.
Well, Lorraine, I don't have exchange on air, but let me take your phone number. And I promise you, this morning, my team will ring you up to see why you've been told you can't get help, because you should be getting help. So if you
so as you understand it, every vehicle with a blue badge should be exempt from paying.
So if I explain, the number of people who have a blue badge is actually less than the number of people who receive financial support from the Department of Work and Pensions. So if we'd said everybody with a blue badge gets support, that's a smaller number than those who get support from DWP. But notwithstanding that, because of my announcement on August the 1st, every single person in London with a non-compliant car and non-compliant motorbike gets support. So I think what Lorraine is talking about is the exemptions, because some people will get a longer period. So what I'd like to do, James, with Lorraine's permission, is for her to give your team her phone number, not on air, and I'll get somebody from my office to ring up Lorraine this morning to see what we can do to support Lorraine, because nobody, not me or anybody, wants Lorraine to be, held captive in a home.
Okay, and then Lorraine, we will then get back in touch with you and find out what's happened.
What we're going to do.
Well, we'll find out.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Lorraine, thanks for ringing in. Lorraine, thanks for ringing in. I really appreciate that.
We'll follow that up as well. Back to the switchboard.
In fact, Lorraine, thanks for that call. Genuinely, and it's distressing for you. And I'm really hoping we can address your concerns. I'm sure we can. And that's what we've been doing throughout this process since I first embarked on this journey in 2017, listening and addressing people's genuine concerns. The next call is from Leeds, and it's Harry. Good morning, Harry.
Morning, Sadiq. How are you?
I'm all right. You okay?
Good. Yeah, hopefully it'll be better if you can help me out a bit here. So I'm a prospective UCL master's student starting in September. And so obviously currently living in Leeds. And for the last 2 months, I've been trying to find accommodation in London. And I've made multiple visits down, spent hundreds of pounds in travel, only to get down there and find that the letting agents have they've sold the room, or the room's already been let. So, every time I'm coming down, I'm being misled by letting agents and landlords. On previous occasions, I've been down and the letting agents haven't even turned up for the viewings. I've got a budget of around £800, which is already expensive compared to previous accommodation where I've lived up north. And so the £800, when I get down there, it turns out that the letting agents and landlords are then starting effectively a bidding war. So the rooms that were valued at £800 on platforms like spareroom.com, Rightmove, have then been the bids go up to about £1,100.
Good grief!
Which is beyond affordable for myself. My family are having to sacrifice quite a bit to help me out, move down there anyway. And obviously, London should be attracting bright people and not necessarily rich people. So my question to you is, what are you going to be doing to help students who do not live in London find affordable accommodation?
Well, Harry, firstly, congratulations. It's not easy starting a master's at UCL, so congratulations on that. I'm afraid the bad news is, your story is one I hear too often in London. Look, let me be frank. I've said this in 2016. We have a housing crisis in London. It's been decades in the making. We are seeking your question was, what am I doing to address the housing crisis, this situation where there are bidding wars, auctions taking place. The average rent in London for a home, Harry, is £2,700 a month. So since I've become mayor, we've started to build and completed record numbers of council homes, but also genuine affordable homes. And we require now, Harry, for halls of residence, for there to be a certain percentage that are affordable for their students, undergraduates and postgraduates as well. And so that's really important for people like you. One of the things that I'm lobbying the government to do is to introduce in London what they've managed to do in Scotland, which is a rent freeze. So what you're the victim of is letting agents raising hugely the rents that tenants pay, which leads to the bidding wars you're talking about. There's nothing that prevents them from doing so. In Scotland, what the Scottish government did after lobbying was first for 6 months bring in a rent freeze. They couldn't do that. And for the next 6 months, rents could only go up by 3%. So far, the government has said no. But the government have listened in previous campaigns we have to avoid, for example, paying a letting agent's fee and so forth. But at the core of this, Harry, is we've got to build far more genuinely affordable homes in London, increase the supply.
It's nothing specific to students. You can't put the frighteners on UCL and insist that they do more to provide accommodation for people like that.
To give UCL credit, UCL and many other universities in London are building student accommodation. And they're working with us to make sure the student accommodation is affordable. But UCL and other universities in London have more students than there is halls of residence. And that's been the issue in London, because we've got more universities in London than any city in the world. And Harry, the other thing you will know is many of our students in London now aren't leaving London because they stay at home. So they're not even going to halls of residence, and they're going to the university nearest to them. You're fortunate you get to experience another city, but my worry is you're being priced out.
And the reason why I can't commute from Leeds, Harry,
right.
Is there any prospect of you not being able to take up your place if this situation doesn't improve shortly?
Well, I do have family friends that live probably an hour and a half, 2 hours out of London. Right. Living in Leeds, it's a 3-hour journey down.
Of course
obviously,
it is.
I'd have to shack up with some family friends, just outside of London. And the problem is the letting agents and landlords are expecting people to do viewings on the day.
Yeah.
And so you get in touch with them and say, I want to arrange, a few viewings for tomorrow because I've got a bit of spare time. So you go on all the platforms, you start messaging people, and then they say, okay, well, we're doing viewings today at 3:00, and it's like, well, I can't get down to London for that. And then my experience told me now that the rooms have gone. So,
Harry, it's even worse than that, Harry. Some landlords and some letting agents are asking for a year's rent at the beginning. And if you can't provide a year's rent, on day one, they're not giving you the property and stuff. And it's causing real heartache to not just students, undergraduates, postgraduates, but to families as well. And that's why I say, in the medium to long term, we've got to be building far more genuine affordable homes, student accommodation. In the short term, though, there is something the government can do really, really easily, which is to freeze the rents and not have a situation where letting agents can do what they're doing to people like you. And those viewings, the 1 hour viewings, what happens is, Harry, you'll know this, dozens of people turn up during that 1 hour window, and he or she who bids the highest gets the accommodation even above the asking price. That's why it's so difficult.
And also, I know you know this, Harry, but if you are shacking up with family friends, then you will be in town once you've started or once you've moved to London to get to those viewings quicker on the day. So hopefully it won't be a permanent arrangement. But that's just me trying to be helpful. It's not got anything to do with the politics of the situation or the urgency of the scenario you find yourself in. 23 minutes after 10. Staying with matters educational, London students have, we've learned this morning, performed best in England in GCSEs. Why is that, do you think?
Well, about 20 years ago, there's something called the London Challenge, which was introduced, which is basically given schools in London who'd been performing badly in previous decades, and it was the Labour government that did that, additional monies because of the inequalities in London. That's fantastic. But frankly, the reason why the children are doing so well is because of their hard work, their teachers' hard work, the families' hard work, and I congratulate every single child who's done well. Can I make this one point, though? There are some children who may be listening with mum and dad and carer who may not have done as well. Don't be despondent, don't be gloomy, don't be depressed. You always get a second chance. And so I know rightly there'll be some really proud parents, really proud children, really proud teachers. But I always think we should spare a thought for those who may be disappointed today, and also make this point, which is, you and I both have talked about this generation being the COVID generation, how difficult it's been for the last 2, 3, 4 years. And so, congratulations to all of who have done well. It's because of your hard work, your teachers' hard work, and your family's hard work. And if you haven't done so well, honestly, speak to your school careers department. There are other things available for you to do if you can't do retakes next year.
Well, how did you do in yours?
I did all right. So I'm of the generation who did O-levels, if you remember.
Yeah, no, I was too.
So I did okay in my O-levels and my A-levels, but I don't think, if I'm honest, there was a pressure from my parents in the sense there is, the social media and so forth there is now. So nowadays there is so much pressure on your kids to do well. It's talked about in the media. There's a social media presence. There's what your mates did, and so forth. But the key thing is not to give up. One of my brothers didn't want to do studies, so he got an apprenticeship, and he's arguably the most successful member of the Khan family, a motor mechanic. And so there's not a one size fits all in relation to this.
Okay, back to the phones.
The next caller is from South London, and it's in Brixton, and it's Charlie. Hi, Charlie.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
I saw this week that the Tory mayoral candidate made some, in my opinion, pretty disgusting comments about Notting Hill Carnival. And claiming that the black community had a problem with crime. Diversity is one of our biggest strengths, and Notting Hill in particular, which I normally go to, is a great example of that. So for a mayoral candidate to say something like that has really shocked me.
This is Susan Hall, Charlie, who said that the Notting Hill Carnival was dangerous and that there were problems with crime in the black community. And it should be moved, I think, is perhaps the crucial point. David Lammy has... go on, what's the question?
So my question was, especially times like this, we should be celebrating and embracing London's diversity rather than causing division. So my question is twofold, I guess. One, Sadiq, do you agree with her comments? And two, if you don't, then should those types of comments rule someone like Susan Hall out of, leading a city like ours, which is extremely diverse?
Well, Charlie, thanks for your question. Look, I spent last night at an event in City Hall where we remembered, reflected and honoured people who were, the honouring was those involved in the abolition. The remembering and reflecting was those responsible for the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm afraid, Charlie, we're still seeing some of the consequences of one of the worst crimes against humanity ever perpetrated, if not the worst. And actually, there are institutional systemic issues in our city and our country. There is structural racism. I've talked about that previously.
Are you accusing Susan Hall of that?
No. What I'm saying is, these issues should be discussed in a nuanced, sensible way. And I worry when politicians and leaders talk in sound bites to try and get a round of applause or to appeal to a certain audience. I'm also worried, and I said this last night in my comments, about crude culture wars. That's what I was leading to, Charlie. And I worry, and I'm somebody who feels like I'm a pawn in these crude culture wars often, as some of the language politicians use. It's for my Tory opponent to explain her comments. But I'll tell you this, Charlie, I, like you, will be at Carnival this weekend. It's worth reminding people of our history. So the Carnival began in 1959 after race riots, where the black community in that part of London there were slums, and the black community were put in those slums in Notting Hill, decided to organise a festival with calypso music, reggae and so forth to celebrate, black culture. In 1966, the first carnival began as it currently is, and I think it's a wonderful occasion over those 2-3 days where hundreds of thousands of people come together, whether it's the floats, whether it's the steel bands, whether it's the calypso, whether it's the reggae, celebrating our diversity, which, like you, I believe is a strength, not a weakness. The reason why I mentioned slavery, James, was because I think the causes of crime are complex, but actually the causes of crime are to do with deprivation, poverty, lack of opportunities, and those are some of the legacies of the transatlantic slave trade. And there are some people who made huge benefits from the slave trade. Go to the City of London, the Square Mile, you see some of the benefits of the slave trade. But there are lots of people and I'm talking about those Londoners from African Caribbean descent who suffered the consequences adversely. And that's what I meant in relation to structural racism. But Charlie, listen, it's for Londoners when it comes to the election on May the 2nd to choose whether they want to have a candidate who wants to be the mayor for all Londoners or a candidate who talks in those terms.
We did discuss some of those issues on yesterday's programme. If you missed it, it is, of course, available from Global Player. Charlie, thank you. Another call, please, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, the next caller is from Twickenham, and it's Anne. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning.
Hiya.
Okay, yeah, hi. My question, obviously I sympathise with the previous, I don't know whether it's previous caller, but, people trying to find accommodation. And it's even worse when people are coming down from the north, because we have been looking for our friends. The guy who said that when he came down, he couldn't, when he got there, either the person didn't turn up or whatever. What we have done for our friend is we actually say, tell us where it is, and we'll go and view it for you, and then using our mobile phone so that he can actually see the property itself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Visit the estate agent on his behalf.
Can I just push you to the question, Anne, if I may?
Okay, sorry.
That's
the question
all right.
is, why are you... I see so many empty offices around Twickenham area. Why are you not converting it into residential accommodation?
Thanks for your question, and I'm sure the caller you referred to, who's going to start his Masters in Harry, will listen to your ideas about other people doing viewings for him. So look, the short answer is it's possible to adapt an office to a home. The planning permission isn't prevented, and the London plan doesn't prevent people from doing so. So if the owner of that office wanted to convert the office to housing, they could do it. But, and here's the but, it's got to be of good quality and decent accommodation. So some buildings built for office are adaptable, can be used for residential. Some aren't fit for purpose. And so depending on who the owner of those offices is, Anne, if it's empty because they can't get a tenant in there, they may decide to convert it to residential. It'd be for your local council to decide whether they can do so. The government have made it easier, by the way, for people who have offices to convert them to homes. And so, again, the owner of that office could do so. I can't, as the mayor, compulsory purchase those offices and turn them to residential accommodation, nor can I, by the way, compulsory purchase properties in London that are left empty that are homes bought by overseas investors using our homes as gold bricks. But I think your point is a point well made about actually if there are parts of London where it simply is not possible to make them economically feasible, we should look at residential. But what we can't do is make sure that in those parts of London where we do need industrial workspaces, offices and shops for those to be converted, because once they're converted they can't convert back. It's very difficult.
Thank you, Anne. We've got time for a couple more, I think.
Great. The next caller is from Sadiq, and I hope I pronounced your name right. It's Kanayo. Is that right, Kanayo?
Yes, it is right. It's Kanayo. Thank you very much, James.
My pleasure.
And good morning, Mr. Khan. Thank you so much for taking my call. So I'm a teacher. I teach psychology and sociology, and I'm super proud of my students receiving their GCSE results today and those who received their A-levels last week. But one thing that's come up in my classroom conversations from 15, 16-year-olds is the cost of living crisis. And it's amazing that these students are aware of the economy. And I'm concerned about the opportunities that, may lie ahead for them in London. How can we ensure that our young people, will succeed in this vibrant city?
Well, can I just say, I began when James asked me about GCSEs by applauding teachers as well. I mean, my sister's a teacher, as is a sister-in-law, and teachers changed my life for the better. So thank you for the work you do with your children. I'm sure inspiring them to do better. But you're right, reminding me as the mayor of some of the adverse consequences of the cost of living crisis. I listened to the exchange between James O'Brien and Keir Starmer earlier on this week, where Keir talked about his concerns going to university today, or last week, I beg your pardon, on A-level results day. And that's what I think you're alluding to as well and articulating. So I think one of the things that people like me should be doing, and I am doing, and I like to give you examples of this, and the government should be doing, is helping people during this cost of living crisis, not exacerbating some of the cost of living issues there are. So what I'm doing, in London to help with the cost of living crisis that directly affects your students is when the government's telling me I should be removing free travel for children, I refuse to do so. It's really important to allow our children to visit parts of our city they otherwise couldn't do. It's also really important to give young people aspiration and hope. And that's why the adult education budget I'm using to give free courses for young people, free courses for those who earn the minimum wage to get more skills for a better job, but also making sure that we celebrate all the various opportunities there are in our city, but ensuring those opportunities are available to Londoners, whether it's in the green economy, financial services, legal services, construction, and so forth. And one of the things I worry about is many of your students who may have got a place to go to university outside of London may choose not to do so because they can't afford to live in halls of residence or in private accommodation and will stay at home and go to university near them. Nothing wrong with that, but that choice has been made because of cost of living rather than because that's the university they want to go to. But we are trying to address the cost of living crisis on a number of policies we're doing, and on our website in City Hall you can go to the cost of living hub. But it is a concern that I've got, and I think the problem it's having on young people is it's stifling their aspiration, which is a big concern. Have some of your students expressed concern about their options, Kanaya?
Yeah, thank you so much for all that you're doing, because those opportunities are absolutely invaluable to our young people. So we're grateful for your support.
Congratulations to you and to your students. It's 10:35. Sadiq Khan with me for a few more minutes. Can I refer you to the Daily Telegraph's report, if I may, that your Deputy Mayor, Shirley Rodriguez, had been putting pressure on experts, on scientists, after they published research showing that perhaps ULEZ was not going to have the effect on air quality that you and your colleagues have long insisted it would and does.
Yeah, can I just deal with this? I saw the reports in the media in relation to some exchanges the Deputy Mayor had with leading experts from Imperial College. And the way it's been reported is taken out of context the exchange between the Deputy Mayor and leading scientist. I think it's right and proper, by the way, that politicians engage with scientists. There is no scientist that I've met who cowers to pressure from anybody else. These are world-renowned experts. I think the issue is there is a conflation of a number of different issues: the ultra emission zone, the work done by the Air Quality Department at Imperial College, the work done by the Engineering Department at Imperial College, a separate piece of work done in relation to what you and I discussed 20 minutes ago, policy introduced by Boris Johnson, the low emission zone. What is quite clear and unarguable, and even the government accepts this, and their own experts, is air pollution is not safe at any levels, and it leads to all sorts of adverse health consequences. Simple as that.
Well, it's not, is it? Because the research published in 2021 showed that the introduction of ULEZ in 2019 cut nitrogen dioxide levels by less than 3% and had insignificant effects on ozone and particulate matter, which prompted Shirley Rodriguez, one of your deputy mayors for Environment and Energy, to tell Professor Frank Kelly at Imperial that she was really disappointed that Imperial College had publicised these findings.
There are two separate pieces of work done by Imperial College. There's one piece of work done by the Engineering Department you referred to, which assessed the air quality on the day ULEZ went live in 2019 to 2 months later. There's a separate piece of work done by Imperial College by the world-renowned Air Quality Department, which looked at the improvement in air quality from the day I announced the policy, because obviously in the lead up to the go live date, people change their vehicles. We've heard that today during Speak To Sadiq. And he then looked at the air quality some months later on, because it takes some time for the cumulative benefits to be seen. And the point I think Shirley Rodriguez was making to the Air Quality Department at Imperial College is people may conflate the work done by the world-renowned Air Quality Department of Imperial College with the work done by the Engineering Department, one person, over a 2-month period. That's the exchange in the emails between Shirley Rodriguez and Frank Kelly. And by the way, Frank Kelly can speak for himself. He's not resiled from the view that many held, Queen Mary, King's College, Imperial College, World Health Organization, Chief Medical Officer of the UK, that the ultra-low emission zone works and has been effective in central London and inner London. And that's one of the reasons why I want to expand it to outer London, because I think this is a right not a privilege.
At what point are you expecting to be able to turn around and say it succeeded, or to concede that it has failed?
I think what happens from Central London and Inner London experiences, roughly speaking, a month or so after the go live date, we can tell how many vehicles are compliant or non-compliant. And then 6 months afterwards, there's a piece of preliminary work being done, which is preliminary work being done about some of the results of particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. And it's a year after the go live date you can see any benefits or disbenefits. That was our experience with 2017, 2019 and 2021. I don't see any reason why that should be different. So the short answer is about 6 weeks after go live, I'll be able to tell you how many vehicles are compliant, not compliant. 6-7 months afterwards, raw data. 12 to 30 months afterwards, we can say how successful it's been or if it's not been successful.
And I suppose there's no way of counting the people whose lives and livelihoods, and we've heard from a few over the last few months on Speak to Sadiq, whose lives and livelihoods are going to be severely compromised. There's no...
Yeah, can I address those people head on? Yeah, no, sure. I just say this, look, we had similar concerns in relation to window cleaners in outer London not being able to do gigs in central London. Musicians, when I brought in the central London ULEZ, musicians who live in outer London not being able to go into central London. I was told central London would become a ghost town because of the central London ultra-low emission zone. The good news is that didn't happen, but air quality improved. In inner London, I was told similar things. You'll remember that at the last mayoral election in 2021, my Tory opponent then campaigned against the expansion of the ULEZ to Inner London, South Circular and North Circular. Again, we were told those in outer London and outside of London would no longer go to Inner London and Central London because of the expansion. And so all I'd say to reassure people who've got, by the way, James, I accept they've got genuine concerns. I'm not in any way saying Lance's call wasn't genuine and he's not genuinely concerned. I accept people are. All I'd say is the evidence is actually most vehicles are compliant. We've gone from 44% of vehicles being compliant in 2017 to cars being compliant, to 97% cars in inner London, 9 out of 10 in outer London. And so more than likely you're compliant and won't be affected, although you see the benefits. And if you aren't compliant and you live in London, there is now support available for every single person affected.
10:41 is the time. Final question. Dawn Butler is my guest on Full Disclosure this week, and announced her ambition to become Mayor of London one day. When do you think that there might be the need for a different Labour candidate? Well,
I've got declaring interest, which is Dawn's one of my best friends, and we don't normally fall out. But if she comes for me in the next 6 months, we'll have words and stuff. But look, I'm quite clear in relation to why I ran to be mayor. It's the London promise that's important to me, which is my ability, as long as I can, to be the helping hand that allows Londoners who work hard to fulfil their potential. I'm thoroughly enjoying this job. I'm thoroughly enjoying giving back to the city that gave so much to me and my family. Looking forward to the campaign when it begins in earnest against my Tory opponent, Susan Hall. And looking forward to serving, the next term, and let's wait and see.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, many thanks indeed. Speak to Sadiq will no doubt return next month. 10:42 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm tempted next to move from London politics to Scottish politics.
When the leaders speak.
Halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the vote.
Free at the point of use and it's paid for by general taxation. Those two principles are sacrosanct for me.
They speak with you.
Rob, the answer is no.
Jack, thanks for calling. This is a great question to start with.
Your questions.
Do you think your refusal to negotiate with us improves morale?
Does he agree that the Rwanda policy is illegal?
Do you think that you are being hypocritical?
What can you do to help me?
On the issues that matter to you.